Hello there. Today I thought I'd take a look at a wine from New Zealand from a region I've not done a tasting from before. So this is O War's Dreadnought Syrah 2017 from Waiheke Island. So Waiheke is an island in the Hauraki Gulf. It's about 20 kilometres from the centre of Auckland. It's a 19-kilometre long island. And unlike most of the islands of the Hauraki Gulf, it's not actually volcanic. It's a rock outcrop. Whereas, I mean, for instance, Rangitoto, its near neighbour, is a scoria cone remaining after a volcanic eruption. It was found in the sort of, I think this was the 1970s, that this was quite a good place within the Auckland region to grow grapes, because actually it was in a bit of a rain shadow, because most of the rain coming from the west, and Auckland has about 1.5 litres of rain a year, so actually reducing that amount of precipitation was beneficial to ripening grapes and reducing the amount of disease pressure you got. So it became quite fashionable to grow grapes there. This particular vineyard, I mean, O War is named after O War Bay, which is at the southeast sort of quarter of the island, and that was actually named by Captain Cook, who I believe anchored there, saw the beautiful tall kauri trees there, sort of tall and straight, and decided that those would make fantastic masts for the Royal Navy's Men of War, and the bay was named O War Bay as a result, and thus the name comes to a group of 4 farms that were purchased in 1993 by the Spencer family. Spencer family are pretty private, made the money in paper milling, I believe, and so they bought these 4 farms, which is about a quarter of the island actually. I think something like 1,800 hectares. Of those, about 60 hectares are vineyard, and actually those are divided up into something like 70 individual vineyard plots. So they've managed to pick out a number of different special terroirs and find the places best suited for grape growing. All that's the idea. But they leave the management of the winery very much to somebody called Dave McTavish, their winemaker, who's been there for the long term and obviously loves the island. One presumes he's pretty well resourced to do this as well. This particular vintage was one that sort of seemed to promise quite well. 2017 was relatively dry in the spring. There was a fairly early and even bud burst. You actually had a drought through most of the summer, and then in the week or so before harvest, as I recall, a cyclone swept in and there were some really heavy rain events, so it was really quite challenging. I can recall driving through Camus and seeing pickers sort of setting out to pick in the mornings there in huge downpours. It was really quite atrocious. So a challenging vintage to be making wines. This particular Syrah is, they say, selected from a number of steep hillside sites, so sites with good sunlight inception, and also therefore having to be hand harvested. The fruit is then taken back to the winery where it's sorted on a table and any substandard or unripe fruit rejected. The majority of the fruit was destemmed and I assume lightly crushed. A portion of whole bunches was retained, and the wines went into open fermenters, and there they fermented with punch downs, and actually the skins stayed in the juice, the must, the fermented wine, for a total of 7 weeks. So quite a long period of time, 6 or 7 weeks anyway. After that, they were gently pressed, and the juice run off into barrel. In barrel, it underwent malolactic conversion, so both fermentation and the malolactic conversion going on with naturally occurring yeasts and bacteria, respectively. The wine stayed in barrel for 18 months. After 18 months, it was racked. The final blend decided upon, and that went back into tank for 3 more months just to harmonise before bottling. So a wine that's had quite a lot of attention. You know, quite handmade in its style, and certainly not being rushed to market in terms of the aging it's received in barrel. Now, the name Dreadnought should perhaps be remarked upon. For those of you who don't remember, Dreadnought was a British battleship built in 1906 that revolutionised naval warfare. She was the brainchild of somebody called Admiral Jackie Fisher, and Fisher decided that if he built a bigger, faster, better armed battleship, Britain would be able to dictate the naval arms race, which it subsequently did with Germany. So Dreadnought, with her 10-12 inch guns and her steam turbine engines, giving her a speed of 21 knots, much faster than any other battleship of her day, revolutionised the class and gave her name to a whole line of battleships. The idea, they say on the label here, is that it's called Dreadnought because it embodies a supreme combination of speed and power. I'm not quite sure how a wine has speed, but I can see the power side of things there. Certainly, man of war, like the allegories there of allegories, is that right? Of using warship names. Certainly, they have a Cabernet Merlot blend called Ironclad, and then they take the names of some other British battleships, Bellerophon and Warspite, for some of their other cuvées as well. So there's a bit of a theme going on there. So stop talking about warships. Let's taste the wine. You've got a wine with a nice intensity of colour there. It's not quite opaque, but it's deep and dark, and I can barely see through that. It's a ruby red with a sort of a darker black red core. It's not particularly purple. Maybe a slightly mauve rim, but it's more a reddish colour than a blue toned colour anyway. So let's have a look at the aromas. The aromas are quite savoury, a little sour, starting to show sort of forest floor, dried leaf development. There are peppery overtones there, quite distinctly. There's a little bit of red fruit. It's a generous red fruit. It's a sort of a ripe, slightly sort of stewed plum, not a prune note. It's not that sort of overripe, high-toned prune. It's more of a rich sort of, can't really get a smell of texture, but sort of velvety toned sort of aromas there in terms of the red fruit. I suppose velvety, slightly dusty maybe would be a way of looking at that in an aromatic way. Let's have a taste. The wine's completely dry, it has balanced acidity. It's instantly savoury. There isn't a ripeness to the fruit. It's very much in the front of the mouth. You've got the savoury, you've got some tannic grip, a little bit of, not really astringent, but there's a mouth-watering bitterness to the front of the palate. And then you've got these peppery spice notes. And then at the back of the mouth, that's where the red fruit's opening. It's a slightly sort of, there's a mulberry note, but to me mulberry is much more juicy. This has got a spice overlaying it, maybe sort of loganberry, that sort of slightly more austere red fruit. Some sort of plums, almost sort of dark red plum to sort of damson or bullace or something through like that. There's a velvety texture. There are fine tannins. The tannins are quite drying. I think this would be a lovely combination with something like something that has plenty of sort of meat juices with it. I mean, game birds, that sort of thing. Something, plenty of flavour and a lovely sauce would act really nicely against this. I think it's a wine that's perhaps in a slightly closed phase. I think the fruit could do with opening up. Its acidity is balanced. Its fruit has power and self-assurance, and I think I am looking for that to open up give it 2 or 3 years. I don't think it has a massively long life ahead of it. It doesn't have particularly sharp acidity, but you know, you could probably very happily keep that for at least 5 years, probably longer, because the intensity and the concentration of the fruit is really good. So yeah, I mean, quite a classic New Zealand Syrah sort of style, very much along the lines of something you might have stylistically akin to something like something from the Northern Rhone, a Cornell or something like that. Certainly not in the lines of the Australian more rich and ripe Shiraz style for the variety. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. Maybe you'll seek out some wines from Man O' War. I think they are quite readily available. Please feel free to like and share the video, and most of all, I hope you'll join us again. Bye now.